I woke up to the sound of my own scream. The room was dark, save for the dim, green glow of the digital clock on my nightstand, 3:33 a.m. My heart was pounding like a drum, sweat soaking through my t-shirt. The dream was vivid, too vivid, like a memory I couldn't shake. In it, I was standing on the edge of a cliff, the ocean roaring below, black waves crashing against jagged rocks. Then, a shove. Not a stumble or a slip, a deliberate push. I didn't see who it was, but I felt their breath, hot against my ear, as I fell. And then I woke up. But the strangest part wasn't the dream. It was the bruise forming on my shoulder, as if I really had been shoved. I live in Savannah, Georgia, in a quaint, two-bedroom house on a tree-lined street. Spanish moss drapes over everything here, giving even the brightest days a slightly haunted feel. I work as a graphic designer, which means I spend most of my time alone, hunched over a computer, listening to true crime podcasts to fill the silence. My social circle is small. There's Jenna, my coworker who insists on dragging me to trivia nights at the local bar, and Ethan, my younger brother, who calls once a week from his apartment in Atlanta. Jenna says I'm a serial monogamist of the single life, always too busy or too guarded to let anyone in. She's not wrong. That morning, after the dream, I tried to shake off the unease by diving into my routine. Coffee first, black, no sugar. A quick run around the block, where the humid air felt like a wet blanket. Then a shower, where the scalding water helped melt away the remnants of the nightmare. But the bruise wouldn't fade. It was a deep purple, tender to the touch, perfectly matching the shape of a handprint. My handprint. As if someone, or something, had grabbed me and refused to let go. By the time I sat down at my desk, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe I'd rolled out of bed and hit the nightstand. Maybe the dream was just that, a dream. But even as I sketched logos for a new client, the feeling of falling lingered, the phantom shove replaying over and over in my mind. Then my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something made me pick up. Hello? Silence. Then, a voice, low, distorted, like it was coming from underwater. You should be more careful near cliffs. My blood ran cold. Who is this? I demanded, my voice trembling. But the line went dead. I stared at the phone, my heart racing. It had to be a prank, some random creep who'd found my number. But how did they know about the dream? I hadn't told anyone, not even Jenna. By lunch, I'd managed to convince myself that the call was just a coincidence. People get weird phone calls all the time, right? I met Jenna at our usual spot, a cozy diner with checkered tablecloths and the best grilled cheese in town. She was her usual bubbly self, chattering about some guy she'd met on a dating app. Earth to Lily, she said, waving a fry in front of my face. You're a million miles away. What's up? I hesitated. Jenna was the kind of friend who would either laugh it off or spiral into full conspiracy mode. But the words came tumbling out before I could stop them, about the dream, the bruise, the phone call. To my surprise, she didn't laugh. Instead, she leaned in, her face serious. That's creepy as hell, she said. You sure you're not being stalked? Stalked? I repeated, my stomach twisting. I mean, the bruise could be from sleepwalking, she said, but the call? That's specific. The thought hadn't occurred to me, and now it wouldn't leave. Jenna tried to lighten the mood, cracking a joke about changing my number, but the rest of the day passed in a fog. That night, as I got ready for bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I double-checked the locks on every door and window, drew the curtains tight, and left the lamp on. When I finally drifted off, the dream came back, only this time, it was different. I was in a forest, the air thick with mist. I could hear footsteps behind me, snapping twigs and crunching leaves. I ran, branches clawing at my arms, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Then, a voice. The same distorted voice from the phone. "Run all you want, Lily. You can't escape." I tripped, falling to the ground. When I turned, there was nothing there. Just the mist, swallowing everything. I woke up gasping, clutching my chest, my heart pounding. But this time, there was something in my hand, a leaf, damp and muddy, as if I'd plucked it straight from the forest floor. I stared at it, dread pooling in my stomach. This wasn't just a dream. Something, or someone, was playing a game with me. And I was losing. The next morning, I woke up to an eerie quiet. The usual hum of Savannah's early risers, birds chirping, cars passing, neighbors chatting, was gone. The air felt heavy, oppressive, like the calm before a storm. I pulled the curtains aside, expecting to see clouds or rain, but the street was bathed in golden sunlight. Still, something was off. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, jolting me out of my thoughts. I grabbed it, my chest tightening when I saw another unknown number. "Hello?" I answered, bracing for the distorted voice. But it wasn't distorted this time. It was calm, measured, and unfamiliar. "Did you sleep well, Lily?" My breath hitched. I didn't recognize the voice, but the tone sent a shiver down my spine. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice trembling. A pause. Then, the same words from my dream, "Run all you want. You can't escape." The line clicked dead. Panic set in. I checked the call log, but the number wasn't there. It was as if the call had never happened. My hand shook as I threw on a hoodie and jeans, desperate to shake the feeling of dread that clung to me like a second skin. Jenna was the only person I could think to call. She picked up after the second ring, her voice groggy. "Lily? It's not even 9. What's going on? Can we meet?" "It's important," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She sighed. "Okay, give me an hour." The diner was unusually empty for a Saturday morning, the clinking of plates and faint chatter doing little to soothe my nerves. Jenna arrived, her hair thrown into a messy bun, wearing an oversized sweater that practically screamed weekend. "Okay, spill," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. I told her about the second call, about the voice repeating the words from my dream. As I spoke, her expression shifted from concern to unease. "That's weird," she said. "But maybe you're just psyching yourself out? Like, your brain's making connections that aren't there." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But then I pulled the leaf from my pocket, the one I'd woken up clutching after the second dream. It was brittle now, its edges curling inward. I placed it on the table between us. Jenna stared at it, her brow furrowing. "Where'd you get this?" "It was in my hand when I woke up," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's impossible," she said, but the doubt in her voice was clear. She reached out to touch the leaf, then recoiled, as if it had burned her. "Okay, that's creepy." We sat in silence for a moment, the unease between us thickening. Then Jenna shook her head. "You need a break, Lily. Let's go for a drive, clear your head." I agreed, desperate for any distraction. We drove out of the city, past moss-draped oaks and sprawling fields, until the buildings and noise of Savannah felt like a distant memory. For a while, it worked. The sunlight filtering through the trees, the sound of tires on the winding road, it was almost enough to make me forget. Almost. We stopped at a small park Jenna loved, a hidden gem with a trail that looped around a serene pond. The air was crisp, the smell of pine and earth grounding me. For the first time in days, I felt a sliver of peace. Until I saw the figure. It was a man, standing at the edge of the pond, his back to us. He was dressed in black, his posture stiff, unmoving. Something about him felt wrong. His shoulders were too broad, his frame too tall, like he didn't quite fit into the scene. "Do you see that?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Jenna followed my gaze. "See what?" "The guy." "By the pond," I said, pointing. She squinted, then shook her head. "There's no one there, Lily." I blinked, my stomach churning. He was still there, clear as day. How could she not see him? "Maybe we should head back," I said, my voice trembling. Jenna frowned, but didn't argue. As we walked back to the car, I glanced over my shoulder. The figure was gone. That night, I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Stress, lack of sleep, overactive imagination, it could all explain what I was experiencing. But deep down, I knew better. Something was happening, something I couldn't explain. I sat on the couch, mindlessly scrolling through TV channels, when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then went out entirely. The hum of the fridge stopped, plunging the house into an unnatural silence. I grabbed my phone, using the flashlight to navigate to the breaker box in the basement. The stairs creaked beneath my weight, the air growing colder with each step. By the time I reached the bottom, I could see my breath. The breaker box was open. Wires hung loose, frayed ends sparking faintly. My flashlight flickered, and in that moment of darkness, I felt it, breath on the back of my neck. I spun around, the beam of light catching only shadows. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it, a presence lingering just out of sight. My chest tightened, panic setting in. I stumbled backward, tripping over a loose board and falling hard onto the concrete floor. Then, a whisper. Low, distorted, and unmistakably familiar. "You can't escape." I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding, and ran upstairs, slamming the door behind me. My hand shook as I locked it, the sound of the bolt sliding into place only slightly calming my nerves. For hours, I sat there, staring at the basement door, half expecting it to burst open. But it didn't. The lights came back on, the hum of the fridge returning as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. This wasn't just a series of bad dreams or strange coincidences. Something was watching me. Hunting me. And it wasn't going to stop. The following morning, I called Ethan. I hadn't told him anything yet, he was my little brother, after all. I was supposed to protect him, not burden him with my paranoia. But the events of the past few days had left me desperate for an anchor. "Lily, you sound terrible," he said after I'd rambled about the dreams, the phone calls, and the figure by the pond. "Thanks," I muttered. "Look, I need to ask you something. Do you remember anything weird about Mom?" There was a pause. "Weird how? Like, did she ever say anything about dreams? Or, seeing things?" Another silence. Longer this time. "Why are you asking me this?" "Ethan, just tell me." Finally, he sighed. "Okay, yeah. There was this one time a few months before she told me she'd been having these dreams about water. Said she kept seeing herself drowning. I thought it was just stress or something." My throat tightened. "And then she fell off that dock." "Lily, it was an accident," Ethan said firmly. "You can't seriously think." "She knew, Ethan." My voice cracked. "She saw it before it happened, just like I stopped myself." The line had gone silent. "Ethan?" I said, my voice trembling. "Lily," he whispered, "someone's at my door." What? Who? I don't know. They're just standing there. His voice was shaky now. Oh God. It's Mom. My blood ran cold. That's not possible. Ethan, get away from the door. She's smiling, Lily. But it's not her smile. Ethan, listen to me. Before I could finish, the call cut out. I tried dialing him back, but it went straight to voicemail. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. I had to get to him. I sped down the highway, the landscape blurring past me. Ethan lived 2 hours away, and every minute felt like an eternity. I tried to call Jenna, but she didn't pick up. When I finally reached Ethan's apartment, the front door was ajar. Ethan? I called, stepping inside. The air was stale, heavy with the metallic tang of something faintly rotten. The living room was empty, the couch overturned, a lamp shattered on the floor. My heart raced as I moved down the hall, toward his bedroom. The door was slightly open. I pushed it wider, my breath catching in my throat. Ethan was sitting on the edge of the bed, his back to me. Ethan, I said, stepping closer. Are you okay? He didn't respond. Slowly, I reached out and touched his shoulder. He turned. His eyes were wide, unblinking, his face twisted in a rictus of fear. His lips moved, but the words were barely audible. She's here. The temperature in the room plummeted. My breath came out in white puffs as I looked around, trying to make sense of what was happening. Then I saw her. She was standing in the corner of the room, shrouded in shadows. It was Mom, or something that looked like her. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, and her smile stretched too wide, as if her skin was being pulled taut from the inside. Lily, she said, her voice layered, like two people speaking in unison. You've been running for so long. Get away from him. I shouted, stepping between her and Ethan. My voice was braver than I felt. Her head tilted unnaturally to one side. It's not me you should fear. And then she lunged. The room erupted in chaos. The shadows seemed to come alive, wrapping around me like tendrils, pulling me backward. Ethan screamed, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. I fought against the darkness, my hands clawing at nothing, the pressure around me tightening with every second. You can't escape, the voice hissed, echoing in my ears. My mind flashed back to the dreams, the cliff, the forest, the whispers. It wasn't just about seeing my death. It was about being marked. Chosen. I reached out blindly, grabbing Ethan's arm. We have to go. I shouted. But he didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the figure, his body rigid. Ethan! I screamed, shaking him. But it was too late. The shadows had reached him, too, curling around his legs, pulling him toward her. And then I understood. The dreams weren't warnings. They were promises. No. I screamed, lunging toward him, but the force of the shadows threw me backward. I hit the wall, my vision swimming. When I looked up, Ethan was gone. So was she. The room was silent, empty, as if nothing had happened. But something had changed. I wasn't alone. The shadows moved. Slowly at first, then faster, twisting and writhing like a living thing. They gathered in the center of the room, forming a shape, humanoid, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, its limbs bending at impossible angles. The figure stepped closer, its head tilting as it regarded me. Its voice was low, guttural, and familiar. You can't escape, Lily. You never could. It was my voice. My knees gave out, and I collapsed to the floor. My reflection stared back at me from the dark glass of the window, but it wasn't me. It smiled, the corners of its mouth stretching impossibly wide. And then it whispered, "Run." I ran. Out of the apartment, down the stairs, into the street. The world felt distorted, the edges blurred, like I was moving through a dream. But I knew I wasn't asleep. This was real. And no matter how far I ran, I could still feel it. Watching. Waiting. Following. Because the truth was, there was no escaping it. The dreams weren't warnings. They were invitations. I drove without a destination, the highway stretching endlessly before me, lit only by the dull glow of my headlights. The radio played static, the white noise a fragile tether to reality. I didn't know where I was going, I only knew I couldn't stop. Stopping felt like surrendering. But no matter how far I drove, I couldn't escape the voice. It echoed in my head, a cruel melody I couldn't silence. "You can't escape, Lily." As dawn broke, I pulled into a desolate rest stop, my body screaming for rest, though my mind refused to quiet. The air was cool, the rising sun painting the horizon in muted shades of pink and orange. For a moment, the world felt still. Normal. I sat on a weathered bench, clutching my head, trying to make sense of everything. Ethan was gone. The thing wearing my mother's face was hunting me. The shadows, they wanted something. But what? I closed my eyes, and the dreams came rushing back. The cliff. The forest. The voice. All of them pointed to one conclusion: I was marked. But why me? What had I done to deserve this? Then I felt it. A presence. I opened my eyes, and he was there, a man in a gray suit, standing across the parking lot. He looked ordinary, almost painfully so, like someone you'd pass 100 times without noticing. But his eyes, they were wrong. Too dark. Too empty. They seemed to absorb the light around them. "Lily," he said, his voice calm and measured, as if we were old friends. I stood, my heart pounding. "Who are you?" "You already know," he replied, stepping closer. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I don't." He stopped a few feet away, his gaze steady, unblinking. "You've been looking for answers, haven't you? That's why you ran. But the truth, Lily, it was never something you had to find. It was inside you all along." "What are you talking about?" My voice cracked, panic rising in my chest. He smiled, a cold, lifeless expression. "Do you really think this is the first time we've had this conversation?" "What?" I whispered, my stomach twisting. "You've been running for so long, Lily. Lifetime after lifetime. Always searching, always afraid. And it always ends the same way." He tilted his head, studying me like a puzzle piece he'd grown tired of trying to fit. "You're the reason it began. And you're the reason it won't end." I took a step back, my mind reeling. "I don't understand." "You will," he said, his voice almost gentle. "In time." He raised his hand, and the world shifted. I wasn't at the rest stop anymore. I was standing at the edge of the cliff from my dreams, the ocean roaring below. The wind whipped around me, cold and sharp, carrying the scent of salt and decay. My heart raced as I turned in a circle, searching for him. And then I saw her. It was me. But not me. She stood a few feet away, her face pale, her eyes hollow. Her clothes were the same as mine, but stained with dirt and blood. She smiled, the expression too wide, too wrong. "It's strange, isn't it?" she said, her voice an eerie mirror of my own. "To see yourself like this. Who are you?" I demanded, though the answer was already clawing at the edges of my mind. "I'm you," she said simply. "The real you. That's not possible, I said, shaking my head. You're lying. She stepped closer, her movements fluid, almost inhuman. Think about it, Lily. The dreams, the voices, the shadows. You thought they were hunting you. But they weren't. They were following you. No, I whispered, my legs trembling. You brought them here, she continued, her tone almost pitying. You always do. Every time, you forget. And every time, they come for you. For us. The memories hit me like a tidal wave, fragments of lives I didn't recognize but felt in my bones. The cliff. The forest. 1,000 places I'd run to, 1,000 faces I'd worn. And always, the same ending. You're lying, I said again, though my voice lacked conviction. I wish I were, she said. But you know the truth, don't you? You were never the victim, Lily. You were the beginning. I stumbled backward, the edge of the cliff biting into my heels. No. This isn't real. None of this is real. Her smile faded, replaced by something colder. It's as real as you make it. And then she shoved me. As I fell, the memories became clear, too clear. The shadows weren't chasing me. They were my creation, born from something I had done, something I couldn't remember. Or perhaps I refused to. The wind tore at me as the rocks below rushed closer, the sound of the ocean deafening. But as the ground rose to meet me, I didn't feel fear. I felt relief. Because deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Again. And somewhere, another me was waking up,